Did I make a mistake by putting smaller tires on my Jeep TJ? Today, I'm here to discuss with you just that. So let's get into this. Let's start with the reason. Why did I put smaller tires on my Jeep TJ? So when I bought my Jeep TJ, it came with 31.5-inch tires. And although I really liked the look of the tire, width and height of it, there were times that I thought it looked a little balloonish, but I still thought overall it looked great on the vehicle. So why would I change? The main reason was when I would disconnect my sway bar, I have a quick disconnect under here, and I would be off-roading. If I were to turn my tires, my front wheels, left or right, the tire would rub on my fender flare. The obvious thing to me was, all right, well, I'll change out my fender flares. I had the stock fender flare, so what I did was I just swapped out for the flat fender flare. And I gotta say, I really like the flat fender flare. I like the way it looks. I think it kind of spruced up the TJ a little bit, I guess you could say. But what I found out was that it wasn't a fender flare issue, because when I would turn the tire now, going off-road with my quick disconnect unattached, then the tire would actually rub on the inside of my fender, the metal part of the fender. So at that point, I was left with a few decisions. I could either do a mild lift, maybe a suspension lift or a body lift, and keep my tires, or I could put little bump stops down here in my coil area to prevent the tire from articulating as far, or I could go with a smaller tire. I really didn't like the idea of increasing my bump stop. I felt like the whole reason I was disconnecting my sway bar was for that full swing articulation, and I didn't want to do anything to limit that articulation. I suppose I could stop disconnecting my anti-sway bar, but I kind of like having that anti-sway bar disconnected. It gives the ride for the Jeep off-road a much smoother ride. It also allows for more traction when I am off-roading, so that wasn't really an option for me either. I could do a lift, but I gotta say, I really like having the stock height of my TJ. I like the way it handles, the ride height, really everything about the stock ride height I enjoy. It has no wobble, no vibration in the wheel. I mean, I could drive this thing with my pinky and it would continue to go straight. It's that smooth. And I know that's not always the case with these Jeeps, especially once you start lifting them. So really the only option I felt I had left was to go with a smaller tire. So like I said earlier, I had a 31.5-inch tire. I dropped down to a 30-inch tire. It's 1.5 inches. Some people would say, that's not that much. Others would know it's a little drastic. So now let's get into it. Now that I've had it for a little bit, was it a mistake dropping down to the tire size? What has happened for the overall performance of my Jeep TJ? But before we get into that, I want to thank our sponsor. I want to thank Truma for sponsoring this video. As you know, in our RV, we have the Truma AquaGo, which is a water heater system that we use for our hot showers. It's efficient, it's been great, but we also use a Truma cooler, especially here in the Jeep when off-roading. We had it out in Moab for the entirety of the trip. We were able to keep sandwiches and sodas. I got it bungeed up back here, and this is a great addition to our off-road adventures. Thank you, Truma. Thank you for sponsoring this video. All right, so we're back, and now let's talk about the overall driving experience of the Jeep with the smaller tire. One, the Jeep feels a little peppier, I guess would be the word for it. I feel like I get a little bit more force in these tires when I'm coming off of a red light or a traffic light. By no means is the Jeep a race car, but it does feel like it has a little bit more oomph off the line. I've noticed also that I'm getting a smidge better in fuel mileage, about 0.5 miles per gallon, maybe even 1 mile per gallon better in fuel mileage. Again, the Jeep doesn't do great in that regard as well. 30-inch tires, stock height, 5-speed transmission, manual, and I'm getting about 17 miles per gallon, which seems to be a lot better than what other people are reporting on the forums. So I'm pretty happy with that. Not that I bought the Jeep for gas mileage. What about off-road? Well, I do have good news to report. After switching to the smaller tires, I took the Jeep out to Moab, which some would say is the off-road capital of the world, and I got to really test this out. In fact, I even got a couple badges here to prove it. So I got on Hell's Revenge, Fins and Things, Gemini Bridges, and several other trails. None of these trails that I just mentioned are incredibly difficult. I would say Hell's Revenge is probably the most difficult out of all of them. And I would say Hell's Revenge is also more mental than technical. I felt Fins and Things was more technical than mental. You got some obstacles in Hell's Revenge. If you're not a fan of heights like myself, you may not like that course. But there are obstacles on Hell's Revenge that are very difficult, like Hell's Gate. And I will say I did not do Hell's Gate, and we're going to get to that in a moment. So out there in Moab, out on the slick rock, these tires did great. These are BF Goodrich KO2s. I felt they were great traction on the slick rock, on the dirt. I took it over by Arches National Park, played in the sand for a little bit. These handle really well. When I'm on courses like Hell's Revenge and Fins and Things, was I scraping the bottom? Yes. Was I scraping my rock slider here? Yes, down underneath. Was I causing any damage? No. I'm hitting skid plates. I'm hitting the armor that I've added to the Jeep before I even changed those tires. I thought that was the most important thing to do to this Jeep was, armor it up, make sure that I ever got into a sticky situation, I'm not damaging anything. So the smaller tires were allowing me, it's probably not the right word, but allowing me to scrape the bottom at times that if I was on a taller tire with a lift, I would not scrape. I was out there with a group of 12 people. I was able to do everything that the other Jeeps were able to do on these trails that I was doing, except for Hell's Gate. But again, I'll get there in a second. Without damaging my vehicle, and I can say that's not the case for everybody that was out there in our group. And some people did have a lift, some people had bigger tires, and they were still tearing up fender flares. They were tearing up side steps. They were damaging their rear hitches. They had to be very careful going through the course. And I felt like my Jeep, even though on smaller tires and no lift, I was armored up enough to maneuver through these courses, make it through everything. Every once in a while, I would get to a situation that I would have trouble climbing or getting over, and I would have to back up and pick a different line. That, to me, though, is part of the fun of off-roading. I am okay with a little bit of a bigger tire. I'm okay with, lifting the Jeep, but I don't want the Jeep to ever be so tall with tires so big that I feel like I'm walking over everything. I liked the fact that I had to back up, pick a new route, pick a new line, I should say. I'm staying on the same course. I'm just picking a different line. I'm picking different tire placement of what rock I want to hit to climb over something. Would I ever go to a larger tire and a lift? My answer is simply yes. Because when I was out there, we did have a guide, and I'm going to get back to that Hell's Gate right now. They recommended that I did not do Hell's Gate, and there were trails out there that they recommended I did not do because of my tire size and my lift. Hell's Revenge, the Hell's Gate, they recommended I didn't do, not so much for tire size, although it was an issue, and not so much because of lift, it was an issue. It was that I have no lockers in my Jeep. So I don't have a front locker, I don't have a rear locker. I do have a limited slip in the rear. I made sure when I purchased this that it did have that at least, but that's still not a locker. So There were a couple things about my Jeep that prevented me from trying Hell's Gate and a stock Jeep TJ. I will say I was the only person out there in Moab in a stock Jeep TJ. I might have been the only one in a Jeep TJ, and people stopped me constantly to ask, on the trail, go past each other, they would wave me down and ask me to stop and say, I haven't seen a Jeep TJ out here. How's it doing? And I would tell them, it's doing great. It really is. And people would even say to me, I have a TJ back at home, but I never thought of bringing it out on a trail like this. I think it's great. I love the challenge. And that was one of the things that the guide had said to me. He said, if you got a lift, if you had bigger tires, we could take you on, I'm trying to remember the names of the trails, and I'm drawing a blank, so I'll put them up here in the corner. There were 2 other trails that they were going to take us on. And he said, with this tire package, without a lift, you're going to have a long, hard day out on this trail with us. And honestly, I thought to myself, I was like, well, I'm okay with that. I don't mind a long, hard day of off-roading. Again, I don't want to just walk over everything. I think the challenge is the fun of the off-roading sometimes. But I did have to think to myself, but I am here with a group. There's at least 12 other Jeeps out here with us. It's not fair to them if I'm slowing the entire group down the entire day. If I was by myself, it was just me and one other person, that'd be fine. And even the trail guide said, if you want to come back on your own, he's like, I can get you through all of this. He's like, it's just going to take some time. So I just thought, to be fair, I skipped those more difficult, more technical courses, and I just did easier courses on the days that our group went out and did more difficult ones. I actually have a blog about this whole experience out in Moab, and I'll put that in the comment section. And you can check out the blog, mods that I recommend for Moab and things like that. So would I go to a bigger tire and a lift? Yeah, I think I will. In 2 to maybe 3 years. I'm going to get the full life out of these tires first. I would like to do about a 2.5-inch suspension lift, and then maybe go with a 32-inch tire. Again, nothing extreme. The reason that I would do those two, that combination, is one, it should not, fingers crossed here when this does happen, it should not alter the driving experience too much in the Jeep TJ. It should still go straight down the road. It's not dramatic. A 2.5-inch, suspension lift and tire of 32-inch is not a huge dramatic change, but it's enough when you go and look at ratings of trails that it's almost like the minimum requirement for some of these trails that are not just in Moab, but all across the country. And, for now, this tire package is working for me. I'm hitting trails that I enjoy, that are challenging. And then, in the future, there's going to be a time where I'm going to be like, all right, well, I'm running out of these easier trails to do. I'm going to have to go with a larger tire and suspension lift to tackle some of these other trails that are across the United States. My goal is maybe not to hit every single one of these badge of honors, but I would like to start hitting a few of them. I got 3 on the Jeep right now. I would like to get some more. We're back to the question, did I make a mistake by going with a smaller tire? At the moment, I don't feel like I did. I'm still out enjoying my Jeep. I'm taking it to Moab. I'm still doing what I would consider, intermediate trails where they're nice and fun. I'm exploring with the Jeep. I'm really loving the ride of the Jeep. And when I'm flat towing it behind my RV, it's now at the perfect height to match up to the back of my RV, where I'm not using any type of adapter to bump my tow bar up or down or anything. It's just perfectly straight across. When I go in 3 years, 2 years, to a 2.5-inch lift with a 32-inch tire, I will have to make some type of adapter or purchase some type of adapter to raise my tow bar up. Right now, it tows perfect. Everything's perfect. Honestly, 2-3 years from now, I might just say, what? This has been the perfect setup for me. I think I'm good leaving it. So my final thoughts on it, at the moment, in the near future, I don't think I made a mistake by going with a small tire, but I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment down in the comments section, have you had a Jeep Wrangler or any vehicle, it doesn't matter, that you either went with a bigger tire or a smaller tire? Do you regret that in any way? Are you more than pleased with the direction that you went with, especially if you went with a bigger tire? That seems to be, the trouble period. Is like anything, over a 32, like 33 to 35, 37s. I was out riding with a Jeep that had 40s on it. But I mean, it took a lot to get that Jeep to ride on 40s. So definitely leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Guys, I want you to take care, safe travels. I will catch you next time.